Welcome to the Ad Astra podcast. Today we have with us again researcher Petra Schmidl. Welcome.
Thank you.
Petra is a researcher at the International Consortium for Research in the Humanities, Faith, Freedom and Prognostication. I always have to check because it's a long name. At the University of Erlangen-Nuremberg. We already talked with her regarding her research on the Yemeni manuscript with lots of astrological references. But today we are also here to talk a little bit more about your research project and with the idea that this kind of compendium not only has astrological material, but it also has it's a compendium of knowledge, so it contains a lot of information. So astrology is one of the facets of series of knowledges that are in the manuscript.
Yeah, that's true. Shall I first introduce very shortly the text we are talking about?
Yes.
Sure. It's a treatise from 13th-century Yemen, written by Al-Ashraf Omar. And he became later in his life one of the Rasulid Sultans, so one of the sovereigns ruling over Yemen for a couple of centuries, from 13th to, I don't know exactly, 15th century, I would say. And this scholar wrote a couple of treatises, and one is this Kitab al-Tafsira fi al-Nujum, what is until now translated as kind of enlightenment, the signs of the stars. But I recently discussed the translation of the title, which is, as you might know, always a little bit difficult to put it in modern English. Probably it's enlightenment is not the best term. Probably introduction might be another idea, or kind of instruction. So that's the treatise. It has in the Oxford manuscript 15 chapters that are more or less unrelated to each other. There are some clusters, let's say. There is a big astrological cluster in the beginning where you have around nearly 20 chapters dealing with several aspects of astrology. For example, the decans, associations of planets, and association of the planets with different things like food, countries, animals, colors, and so on. And you have a smaller cluster on astronomical timekeeping and calendars and almanacs. So this is one part. You have a little bit mathematics at the end. In particular, how to write numbers in the alphanumerical notation, but also by using the Hindu-Arabic numerals. You have a little bit geography, a little bit about instruments. So it's quite a wide variety what you find in there.
Yes,
a little bit of everything.
A compendium of knowledge, of practical knowledge, I would say.
Yeah, it is. And it's there are also some prognostic practices, semantic practices in there. And my general impression at the moment is there is nothing completely new. Yeah, but he's very familiar with his sources, usually without mentioning them. And it seems that he, let's say, fits them to Yemeni reality a bit. Yeah, one of the last things I did was a geographical table found in this manuscript, and he obviously uses former traditions of geographical coordinates, but there are some Yemeni cities without any, where we don't have any former mentioning or something like that. So I think this describes it quite a little bit, the character of the whole thing, I hope.
Yes, yes. So, regarding geography, you did find some associations with the signs and places. Do you know if he's making these associations in this region, in this specific region, or is it a more general association? Because I'm asking you because sometimes in treatises of astrology we find that the author, and this can be in Arabic or even a later Latin European text, in which the author gives a general overview of the world and just gives a bit of an idea of how the world is divided, or sometimes they're more specific, and they're more specific to either Europe, where they're working, or in the Middle East, where they're centered. What's the case with this author? Does it goes around more around the Yemeni geography, or does he extend more?
Okay. There are several parts where you can have where geography comes in this treatise, and where you have geographical places, localities related to the zodiacal signs, for example. There it seems, but this is still work in progress. There it seems he rather relies on former sources. He seems to take into consideration mainly Kushya ibn Laban's Mujmal. This is an introductory text written around the year 1000 in what's today Iran. And there it seems he uses these associations he found in this source. But I didn't find any Yemeni specifics in these associations. I found them in the geographical table, but not in these associations. But on the other hand, you all know that you have to know where you are for your astrological calculations. So it's not completely unrelated.
Exactly. Yeah, because we have seen that exactly appearing in other manuscripts, in which you have coordinates. So coordinates used for the calculations, those are usually very precise and have to do with the region where the person's working. But the associations, geographical associations with the signs, which are used mainly in interpretation, are usually more tend to be more general.
Yeah.
And then of in European terms, the one that I know by heart is Johannes Schroner, for example. In his treatise, in one of his treatises, he just gives the general Ptolemaic association and geography. Elena wrote a paper on that.
Actually, talk about that. I wrote a small paper about geography, and I went from Manilius and Ptolemy until William Lilly. So to see what kind of associations and differences or similarities they have, and if you put everything in the map and see them sequentially, chronologically, you see that Manilius or Ptolemy, they are very general. They don't have many details. And, other astrologers or geographers, if you prefer, that are living in a certain place, they give more details for that place. And then another one comes in later and copies all this information and adds more for their own place. And then this is something that they are like adding more information.
Yeah.
See where they are interested. For instance, William Lilly, which is much, much later, focuses on England, Ireland, and Scotland.
Yeah, because it's his region. That it's
It still follows Ptolemy in a way.
Yeah.
It gives more detail.
Yeah.
And for example, Petra Schmidl, which is a Spanish writer who also worked in France, if I'm mistaken, and Antonio de Najera, which is Portuguese, and they, because they're very close to the European center, they give a lot of detail, not only of the Iberian Peninsula, but also of the middle of Europe. So you have all these divisions in countries and counties and duchies, and everything is very well divided. And in an impressive level of detail.
Of course, this is later. The manuscript that you're dealing with is much earlier. So I think these kind of associations become more and more and more detailed as time goes by.
Yes, it might be worth to do a similar comparison of, let's say, the introductory treatises into astrology we have in Arabic, and that Charles Burnett and Michio Yano and Keiji Yamamoto translated and edited quite nicely. And I think it's my impression at the moment is that they are rather consistent. Yeah, that what Abu Masha provides in both of his treatises is more or less the nucleus or the kernel of what then we find in Al-Kabisi and in Biruni and in Kushiar. What is no wonder, because they depend, they know very well Abu Masha and use it, and so it's most probably you get a similar result, that they have a common nucleus, and that they add details depending where they, in particular, where they live and which sources they know and take into consideration. And so, but it might be quite interesting to do the same thing, this mapping with the timeline, to see how it works. Yeah.
I almost felt tempted to make a video with animation, seeing the
yeah.
Because you can see the focus of attention moving from East to Europe, and then shifting again, because by the 15th century they are like returning to Ptolemy. They are like returning to the classicist, or what they call the pure Greek ideas. So they were like again adopting Ptolemy's ideas and associations.
Or if once, and this is part of Elena's project also, once we really go into the sources, Arabic sources, early Latin or even Hebrew sources, I think we'll find a lot of detail for cities and for regions, and because all of this was extremely needed for prediction, agriculture prediction of political events, all of that was
also
necessary.
For propaganda. I remember this, I think it's 15th century association of Venice, Florence, the city and the city-state of Florence with Venus, and they said, because we are associated with Venus, our women are very pretty.
Okay.
Tourism. Or for marriage, like come and marry our women, they are so pretty.
You're thinking about, let's say, more specific or associations. The only thing I have in mind is this kind of historical astrology you might know from the Arabic sources, where you have these horoscopes casted, for example, for the rising of the Abbasids, when the Abbasids came to power, and they did a horoscope to explain this. How this happened, this kind of, let's say, a little bit of backward instead of forward prognostication, kind of backward explanation.
Reverse engineering.
When things happen the way they did,
so this kind of, as far as I remember, this kind of historical astrology is not very common in the European sources.
No.
But
they mention it, but it's not as common, and it was not, especially by the end of the Middle Ages, it was not something that was completely accepted by the church.
Although we have some churches or cathedrals that were they found they elected the best moment.
But not. I'm not talking about that kind of election. I'm talking about historical astrology.
Okay.
The rise and fall of kingdoms, the rise and fall of religions, prophets. Christianity doesn't adhere too much to that kind of narrative, because
although they exist.
They exist,
and they keep talking about, they keep prophesying about the prophet or a new religion.
But that's always a very
But,
have long. I don't recall any long historical treaties with of Latin origin. I might be missing something.
What they do is they get the Arabic works and they translate it, and
Abu Masar is one of the main sources for conjunctions, the study of the conjunctions.
They adopt this idea, but they don't really. Let's say they don't write more primers about this. What they do is they use this source to write for a specific patron or something, and that
I think what this is a bit more restricted in time. Yes, a certain event, a certain conjunction, a certain series of conjunctions. I don't think we have treaties on historical astrology like we find in the Arabs. I was thinking of the Al-Kitab Al-Kamil, which is a large. I don't know if you know that one.
If not, we will send it.
I can send you the reference later, and he makes large historical narrative of the Prophet and the period of the Arabic world, which I don't think there is an equivalent, Christian equivalent.
It was not extended, so they would refrain to do it very publicly. They could do it for a patron or something, but not in the open.
But it's similar to these that you have the localities added to the associations with the planets, for example, the zodiacal sign. I think this is another kind of adaptation of the methods and procedures to, let's say, your own surroundings, your own context. It goes in a similar way that you adapt things and make them suitable to your own
reality
or surroundings, and that's the only thing I have in mind. Also, it's a little bit far away. It's not that easy than adding a couple of cities, for example. But it's also a kind of adaptation. I would say.
Sometimes recording of local traditions. I was recalling, for example, Ibn Ezra, who's peninsular. He records a lot of ascendants of cities, which is some information that doesn't appear in all treaties, but he does talk about the ascendant of Toledo and of several Iberian cities, with great detail, sometimes even to giving the degree of the ascendant of the city. And sometimes saying, well, there are those who say that this is the degree, the other ones that say this. So he records that, and probably he knows that because that is the practice, the local practice where he was born, where he learned. So he records that. So perhaps in some of the treaties we are also having this local tradition that is being recorded when it exists. I'm not sure how extensive.
Well, also in Portugal and some peninsular, other Spanish, but mainly in Portugal, we have attributions of 2 signs to 1 city. So this is probably the ascendant, the MC, the midheaven.
Most of the time.
Most of the times it should be that.
Yeah, usually the case when we have 2 is either you have 2 adjoining signs. So they're not sure exactly if it's the end of a sign, the beginning of the other. This is rare, but it happens. And sometimes it's like
forming a square.
So you have the angles in which you have, for example,
for Lisbon.
For Lisbon, Lisbon is either attributed to Cancer or to Libra. So when you think of it, if you have Libra rising, you would have Cancer culminating. So probably that's what they're talking about, the ascendant and the midheaven of the city. It's a possibility. They also have, for example, Braga in the north of Portugal, which is a city which constantly appears of Portuguese, and this is something we have experienced. Portuguese cities, the 2 that constantly appear in astrological treatises is Lisbon, of course, and Braga, which is a very, very old city. Braga appears usually as Scorpio, or attributed to the sign of Scorpio, but in some books also to Leo. And this is again, if you have Scorpio rising, so the Scorpio.
Scorpio rising.
And then Leo will be culminating.
Yes.
So that's what they're referring to. The problem is always we never have a complete explanation by the author, or rarely we have the author explaining this in detail. They just list it, and they expect people to know what he's talking about.
Brings to the matter of attributing this sign or signs to a place or a city. For cities, probably they had maps for the foundation or for some crucial moment. But for regions, it could be just some, I don't know, some character, some trait of the region. For instance, these attributions, small attributions in the map, we can see that near the river, following a river, there are, generally speaking, water signs.
So they use analogy to connect them. I'm just thinking about concerning this treatise, this Yemeni treatise from the 13th century. Let's say, as far as I did research on the astrological contents, and it's not completed at all. It's in, let's say, in the middle stage at the moment, because sometimes it needs a rest to get new ideas to get developed, and then I'm going to other chapters. There are enough to do. In the astrological chapters, I don't have this, let's say, this coming in of Yemeni reality or a Yemeni context, but I have it, as I said, I have it, for example, in the almanac, when he described ships coming and going from Aden to India, and when they are coming back. We have some specific plants mentioned that grow in the Yemen. As in the geographical table, we have Yemeni cities you don't find in the sources, as far as we can tell. So there it comes in, and what I find is probably also interesting, in particular, and to have to keep in mind when I'm going to the astrological chapters. A colleague of mine, Daniel Varisco, is at the moment working on an agricultural treatise. The same scholar wrote this, Al-Ashraf Omar. And to me it's not completely clear, but it seems that he really discussed with Yemeni farmers about agriculture, so that he had let's say up-to-date, directly from the countryside information in his book. This is what my colleague tells me about. And I deem a scholar or a person that is interested in being up-to-date, that things he's doing fits to his context, his surroundings. Might do the same in other of his treatises. So that's I'm a little bit alerted to not to overlook possible let's say Yemeni adaptations, if you want to say. But I can track them down at the moment only in geography, and in a completely different chapter. There's a chapter on magic squares that were used as planetary amulets. And I do this together with another colleague, Bing Callum.
Bing Callum, I know him.
Yes, and he found the source of this chapter, and the source is interestingly also a Yemeni scholar, a little bit earlier, and most probably in the duty of Al-Ashraf Omar's father, so of his predecessors. So he was at the court when he was, let's say, still the crown prince. And I think this is, it connects things, let's say, to make it simple. So there we have these regional influences. They are clearly there.
One of the interesting things of this knowledge, ancient knowledge, and is that everything is in a way connected. They don't have the same kind of hermetic divisions that we have. They don't compartmentalize so much. They have knowledge. They have applications of knowledge, but they are quite open when it comes to knowledge. They want to connect all the knowledge, and they want to collect also all the knowledge. So hence these books, these very very comprehensive books about knowledge, that as the one that you are like now translating.
Yeah, it's in the when I started doing research on it, I was really a little bit buffered, let's say, because the chapters seem so unrelated. Yeah, but it was most probably a too modern view on the topics. Yeah, for example, if you think about orientation, yeah, or about prognostication, then all the topics dealt in this treatise are quite useful. Yeah, they did not provide any high-end science or something like that, but it's useful for several problems, and it's probably just a reference book made for himself. So.
Yeah, and I don't know if for them there was this idea of high end, or maybe the practical application was really, really prioritized. For instance, we don't know. We think of some types of knowledge as better, more important, or more complex. We don't know. For them, we don't know what it was, because they could value something different.
Yeah, what we have for the Arabic sources is, of course, a kind of theoretical treatises, philosophical treatises that qualify or categorize different fields of knowledge. Yeah,
Oh, yes.
and there you get, of course, a kind of ranking of knowledge. Yeah, but of course it also depends on the time and place when the treatise is written, and of the let's say the religious background, the political background, and so on and so on and so on. So it's not a general statement for forever, so just one statement for a specific time and place.
Yeah. I think one of the interesting things of talking with someone who studies a different period is that we are looking at same things, but in different stages. And I can tell you that in the 15th century, 15th century, yes, one of our kings was very prone to writing. He has this notebook with philosophical ideas, and with all sorts of religious commentaries. And then he has something about a remedy for the flu, or even better, because he was married and his wife had children, something to put on the woman's breasts to make the milk dry.
Yeah.
And he's in the same book with philosophy.
Yeah.
Or like how to build a canopy without columns. And then there's something for flu problems,
and how to tell the time at night.
How to tell the time.
All that. So
everything is together.
It's an assortment of curiosities and knowledge and reflections and more philosophical, some more practical, which he compiles in the book. This is not as organized as, for example, your treatise, because this one is divided as chapters, but this is more miscellanea. But it's still the same idea, to collect
what is interesting,
and useful information and knowledge, really.
Yeah. This let's say this combination of different kinds of knowledge was in the beginning one of the reasons why I got very interested in this treatise, because he has, as I said in the beginning, he has this cluster of astrological chapters in the beginning, but in the end, for example, he has a Qibla scheme. This is an approximate method to find a direction towards Mecca. So it's a pure religious or ritual use of this chapter. Yeah, there's you can't use it for anything else than for determining the direction towards Mecca. So he combines topics that in modern research was sometimes denounced as not combinable. Yeah, and there we have a book that and a scholar who does it, and that's I think is quite important. And this is this combination as far as I know, becomes more common in later times, especially in Ottoman and Safavid times. So it's 15th, 16th century. But we are talking about a 13th century treatise. So I think this is quite interesting. But I wouldn't say it's unique. Yeah, it's possibly a little bit depending on research interests. Yeah, what texts are you will be published on which texts are people doing research? Yeah, so I wouldn't say it's unique, but it's I think it's important to add it to our modern field of knowledge.
And it is particularly important to understand it's in its own context, because what you're saying is that it compiles all sorts of knowledge, but this coexists with what you just said, that philosophers would have this very well organized idea of knowledge and different areas of knowledge. So they would have this hierarchy of knowledge, and also, as you know, this different different capacities of the mind and everything. So everything would be very well organized in philosophy and also in theoretical terms. And then you have this, which is a practice, someone who just compiled whatever he thought it was interesting. And it could be religious, it could be astrological, it could be medical, geographical, about food, whatever. So this is the practical people reacting to knowledge in a different way of the idea, the organized, very well organized and very symmetrical idea of knowledge. We have this, these schemes with knowledge very well, well, and then we have this.
yeah, that's true. I had a couple of years I had the opportunity to introduce this text in a conference that was talking about decision making by sovereigns. Yeah, how did a sovereign come from, let's say, the information he has at hand to a final decision? Yeah, and one of the possibilities is, of course, astrology. Another very common in Europe is geomancy. And so they asked me to introduce this text and just to have a look on it on a perspective I've never thought about. Is it useful for a sovereign? Yeah. And I would say it is not really useful for a sovereign alone. It's if you want to do a decision, this treatise is useful for a Muslim because he can find the direction towards Mecca. And there's another chapter that tells him the prayer times a day, when to pray. But it's also useful for, let's say, a kind of educated audience that wants to know, for example, some elections that tells you at which time it is appropriate to go for travel, for example, to buy and sell and such things. So it's not specific knowledge for sovereign, but it's let's say for an educated Muslim audience, it's quite useful.
Yes, a little bit for the different moments in life. It would provide useful information, not only for praying, but for other thoughts of activities.
Yeah.
One of the book I explored in my MA was on medicine, and not a physician's book, but it's for the common person. So for someone who knows how to read, of course, this is still an elite, but it's a more so it's not for an expert. It's not a book for a physician, but it is by Aldo Brandino of Siena. His 13th century, and he has sort of a general book in what is medicine, what are the basic precepts for healthy living, what are the different medical operations and why do you use them, and a huge section on the properties of food, meat, eggs and dairy, and several plants, fruits, nuts. So he has a huge section in which he details the qualities of each of mathematical and physiological qualities of each of these elements. And this is really I think it's one of the first books on medicine to be written in a common language, in this case French. So it's not a Latin. It has a later Latin translation, but it was originally written in French. So it's for
common people.
It's not for a scholar.
You forgot to say the title.
Oh, it's Le Régime du Corps.
The regimen of the body.
The regiment of the.
There are also some chapters for women who are breastfeeding.
Yes, breastfeeding.
Yeah.
It's not extensive. It doesn't have the
small
but it has breastfeeding, pregnancy.
And for sexuality. One of the chapters is it's written for men and by men and for men, and it is aller à la femme, which means going to the woman.
Okay.
When to
and how to properly.
How to do it properly. Also.
In a healthy way.
But this means that the treatise is, let's say, written for a educated French reading audience in the end. So
I think it would be an equivalent to our healthy books. You know, that diet books. It's a complete diet book of medical practices, food, things to eat, what is there.
Yeah.
Even if you're not a physician and you wouldn't know how to evaluate the sickness and exactly what remedy to apply, you have a general idea, general culture. You do have an idea of how it works.
Also, this kind of knowledge was also a sign of status. You know, someone who can understand these things and also have dominion of his own body and the way the food habits, everything. So this is kind of also like a mark of status and nobility. You have knowledge, you can regulate your own body. And there is the equivalent because of what you are talking about, the sovereign and being useful to the sovereign. There's the equivalent of this for kings, which is the miroir, como é que se diz? Do Egídio, the mirror of princes.
Yeah.
And also these kind of books, and there are others, they existed. And so it was like knowledge, and most of this knowledge comes exactly from the manuscripts, the same family of manuscripts, the one that you're studying. It's a little bit of everything. Very, very interesting. Even if the purpose is not the same, and obviously it isn't, from what you said, the idea of collecting useful information from books, that is what I meant. It's like even if it's for other purposes, it has the same underlying idea of a collection of knowledge
and the status that having this knowledge and being able to write a treatise would give to the person, to the author, even if one of royal lineage, it be a knowledgeable king.
And of course,
this is a motive. This is quite important for the Russellites because they are a dynasty that came from outside to the Yemen. They are, as far as I know, they were of Turk descendants. They were in the. Then they came to Cairo. The family or the ancestors came to Cairo together with Saladin, and with a brother of Saladin. They went to the Yemen, and they first were some kind of high-ranking, how do you say, nobleman, nobleman, and finally they get they became the sultans, and so they came from outside, and they are in need of legitimization of their rulership, And it appears to me, because it's not only this author but also his father and his brother and for some of his successors, all are either related to scholarly treatises or wrote them by themselves, and this Al-Ashraf Umar, who wrote a treatise I'm doing my project on, even wrote a genealogical treatise. So where he develops a kind of ancestry that goes by many steps in the end back to the Prophet Muhammad. Yeah. So I think this kind of legitimization is not the main motive to write this treatise, but it's somewhere in the background to this and to more in this genealogical treatise. It's quite much more obvious, yeah. But I think also this to demonstrate that one is an educated man, yeah, who knows about astronomy and so on, is something that is behind the scenes, let's say.
It is to consolidate power, not only the military power, political power, and then the cherry on top of the cake, also an illustrated man, someone who knowledgeable. That is kind of another layer of legitimization. Wisdom.
Yeah. That's quite true. Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else you like to discuss?
For now, I think we could stay. Do you have other?
No, I think
we should.
I think we got all of quite an interesting and round conversation on this kind of treaties, which is quite interesting because this will places also this astrological knowledge when it's being applied by a nobleman and for a king. But this is not something that is written for a nobleman, but something which is written by a nobleman, which shows us that in several instances of time, in several periods, we have this education, at least this basic. This is not as basic as we could, but there's a basic education of astrology and astronomy. Now, and there's all that, everything that is associated, of course, to the kings. So usually a nobleman at certain periods and in certain courts will have this basic knowledge. So it's something that is just for a group of scholars isolated. It doesn't need to be necessarily so. It is part of the common education of a nobleman.
And
part of the civilization.
Yeah, this is for this time and period. That's clear.
Yeah, there might be exceptions, of course. There might be periods where this doesn't occur for reasons, but it does. It is quite common to have this legitimization and this knowledge being taught by the nobleman. We see that. We are seeing that in Yemen. We see that in Europe later on. And probably earlier on, we'll see that again. The idea of, also, as you mentioned, the Secreto Secretorum of that, Alexander the Great had this knowledge. Even if it isn't so historically, the idea is there. That the king and the nobleman and the ruler need to have the knowledge, or else you will not be able to dialogue with the advisors as well. So this, I think it's quite important.
Even later, Alfonso the X of Castile was responsible for many translations from the Arabic into Latin and into Castilian directly. Basically, one of the books he ordered translation was the complete book of the knowledge of the stars by a man called Ali Ben Rajal. He is the grandfather of, he is from Castile, but he's the grandfather of one of our kings, King Dinis. And when this king was born, he offered the translation also to the grandson, a copy of the translation to the grandson. So this is something that is important, this knowledge of the stars in this case, or this kind of manuscript as the one that you are working with all sorts of knowledge together. So it's something that people would value and transmit to generation. So this is quite interesting. Yes, in different. I know we are coming to the same idea from different periods, But that's what makes it so interesting. I love to talk with people that study different periods, either before or after, because we can see the ideas, the same things, but in different stages. That's one of the things I find absolutely fascinating. And we can see that this is being developed there, maybe in a slightly different context, maybe with a different intention, but it remains. And we can find this again and again later in time.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, thank you very much for this nice conversation.
Thank you for the conversation. I think it was a very nice conversation, and we'll
talk again.
We'll talk again, I'm sure.
My pleasure.